right, we're in business. Let's see there. Yeah, it's probably all right. All right, cool. Hello, Shalom Aleichem. Today, I've been all over the place. Sorry about that. Everything's, we're not exactly going in an order here. Maybe Bezrat Hashem one day we'll figure that out. I'll figure that out. But today, I wanted to talk about the weekly Parsha just because this Parsha Vaera, if, anyone is following the weekly cycle. If you're not, that's okay, no big deal. But like I've mentioned before in previous classes, like the Torah is totally permitted for a Noahide to read the 5 books of Moses. Nothing wrong with that. And I would argue even beneficial sometimes, especially when it comes to parshas like these. In this parsha Vaera, we have 5 of the 10 plagues, right? 5? I don't know, I probably should have counted. But so it's a continuation next week. But yeah, so these plagues are happening to non-Jews. These plagues are happening to the Egyptians. And, Hashem says, several times in the Parsha that he's bringing these makot. How many? 6. All right, I stand corrected. 6 makot. And as my Rav was explaining to me last night, they're not plagues, they're makot, right? Because a makkah in Hebrew is like a smack, right? And which, in reality is a much more appropriate term for what's happening. Because, what do we think about in English or in modern speech? Like, what's a plague? A plague is like the Black Plague, right? Like the bubonic plague, like a sickness, like a pandemic, whatever. That's a plague, right? But when you look deeper into the text, it becomes very apparent that there's no really the closest thing you get to that is the boils, which is the second to the last makkah that we get. So I just wanted to run through the parsha. Or not the whole parsha, but just the plagues specifically, because they do reveal a lot about how we should be relating to Hashem, even Jew and Noahide alike. And that's the beautiful thing about this parsha, is that even though the Jews weren't affected, these makot were just as much for the Jews as they were for the Egyptians. And this is how Hashem works. This is how Hashem runs the world. He afflicts our enemies to teach us a lesson, right? So that Chas v'Shalom, he should not have to afflict us with those same punishments, right? So let's just get into it, because as if you've been in this class before, you know that Zoom will kick me off the thing when I run out of time. So and as always, if you have questions, please just interrupt me. Don't even raise your hand or nothing. Just like unmute yourself, right? Comments, complaints, anything like that. So let's see. Where does it see? So Hashem tells Moses, I've made you a master over Paro, so don't be afraid. Just go over there, tell him what's up, and tell them to let the Jews out of slavery. Hashem tells him ahead of time, like he's not gonna listen to you. So just like keep that in mind. So you're gonna do all these miracles with the staff and everything, and he's still not gonna be convinced, because his magicians are gonna be doing the same thing, and that's exactly what happens. There's an episode where Moshe and Aaron bring their staffs to Paro's court, and Aaron actually throws his staff down, and it turns into a snake. And then the other Egyptian magicians do the same exact thing, but then Aaron's staff ends up swallowing up the rest of the snakes, or the staffs, right? So that's like the first of it. That's how they, they're kind of displaying their power. So where is it? I'm trying to find where it comes in. Okay. So the first makkah is blood. That's what happens. So Moshe himself doesn't do this, and the way the commentaries explain why Moshe himself doesn't do this is because he was saved by the water, as if you recall, when Moshe was placed into the Nile, it was to save his life. So the way it works is if you're saved by something, you don't bring a punishment on someone else through that same thing. So it wasn't within Moshe's wherewithal, I guess, to put it a certain way, to bring a makkah through the water. So he had Aaron do it. So Aaron was commanded to basically go to the Nile River, and it says, stretch out your hand. Say to Aaron, stretch out your hand with your staff over the rivers, over the canals, over the reservoirs, and raise up the wrong. That's the frogs, which we'll get to it. But it's the same thing by the blood. Here it says, even the same language is used. It says, Hashem said to Moses, say to Aaron, take your staff and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over the rivers, over their canals, over their ponds, and over all their gatherings of water, and they shall become blood. There shall be blood in all the land of Egypt, and in the wood, and in the stones. So that part is kind of mystical, or not mystical. It's kind of elusive. But we'll get to it. So basically, what happens is not just the Nile River gets turned into blood. All the water in Egypt gets turned into blood, like whether it be in a bottle or in a jar or in the house or 10 miles away, like that's the meaning of it. There shall be blood in all the land of Egypt, right? But this didn't happen to the Jewish people, and the way I learned it is that whenever the Jews lived in Egypt, right? So the water that they would see, that's in front of them, that they would interact with, also turned to blood. But as soon as the Jew went to go grab the cup or whatever, the bottle, it would turn right back into water, immediately, and they would be able to drink it. And that was part of the miracle that happened, part of the makkah. But there's this other part that I want to point out, and you'll start to see as we go along why this is relevant to Noachides as well. Besides the fact that this is happening to non-Jews, right? So there's that. And the way, as we were talking about in a previous class, the way the sages, the way Chazal derive these Noahide laws, and the way they're able to put it into the Gemara, and the way they lay it out like that in Masechet Sanhedrin, is they look into the Torah like this, and they basically say, well, if Hashem punished the non-Jewish nations for something, it must be because that was a prohibition, right? Because Hashem, in his infinite justice, would never punish you for something that wasn't prohibited in the first place, right? So the same can be said by a Jew or a non-Jew, right? Hashem would never punish you if that, right? Like Hashem's not going to punish a non-Jew for eating non-kosher food, or not putting tefillin, or doing something like that, right? Because they're not even mitzvahs for a Noahide, right? So you look into the Torah in situations like this, and even later when the Israelites are conquering the land of Israel, or about to get into the land of Israel, and Hashem is basically flattening their enemies out, he's just steamrolling them ahead of time. The Jewish people aren't actually doing any of the milchama. They're not actually waging war on their own. They're doing their own. They're putting in their own effort because they have to. But it's really Hashem. Hashem is delivering. That's the language of the Torah. He's delivering the enemies into their hands. So it's really Hashem who's waging the war, right? So it says here, there shall be blood in all the land of Egypt, and all the wood, and in the stones. So this is an allusion to. Now this doesn't come up in the Rashi. Okay, yeah. So it doesn't come up directly in the Rashi, but the way I learned this is that the wood and the stones doesn't only apply to the vessels. That is what Rashi says. Rashi says that the wood and the stones, that means even the water that is in wooden vessels and in stone vessels, which is like kind of what we said, like even like bottles of water, jars of water, everything like that. But a deeper kind of analysis of it could be like the wooden and stone idols that they have, right? And this is very, very important. I think this is like the biggest takeaway from it all. Um, and we have to remember that in Egyptian mythology, in the Egyptian Avodah Zarah, at this time, right, there's, if you look in history, you know, if you're a history buff, you can look this up. Like ancient Egypt had different eras of different gods, according to the pharaoh that was ruling at the time, right? And then even within that, there was different cults that formed around one god or another. Even though they were polytheistic, they had gods for all this whatever. But they would focus on one or another depending on the era or the time or whatever. So in this time in Egyptian history, the main god of the country was, or like you could say like the ministering angel, the ministering god of Egypt at the time was the Nile. They worshipped the Nile. And it's not too hard to understand why, because in Egypt the rain is not so common. I don't even know if it rains at all. I don't know. I'm not like a geology major or whatever, but I can imagine it doesn't rain that much. But I do know for sure that Egypt's primary source of irrigation, primary source of agricultural sustenance comes from the Nile. And that's because the Nile will flood periodically, and then the floodplain becomes irrigated. And so what they would do is they would dig channels from the riverbank to their fields. And so when the Nile would flood, it would like seep into the channels, and then it would go into the field and like water the field, right? So the Nile is like the source of all their sustenance. So they worship the Nile. And so not only like there's this one level of like, yeah, okay, we're gonna just kill your god, right? We're just gonna like get that out of the way real quick, which is really deep, right? But also not just the Nile, all of your deities that you have, all these little getchkas that you have, like all your crosses and stuff. You like imagine like just starting to bleed from the eyes, like hey, if you don't get the message, like I don't know what to tell you. But the significance of this is for Hashem to say like, hey, like you don't start up with me, guys. Like your gods are nothing. Like I can make your gods bleed. I can kill your gods. Like you don't mess with me, right? And it's really just a way for him to establish authority over all the other false gods that they have. So it goes on. The Egyptians try to do the same. Yeah, the Egyptians try to do this. The magicians try to do the same miracle, and they do, but not like to the same scale. And it's they do it. It says with their charms, and Rashi says the word letechem means a demonic practice. It doesn't make sense because I'm not reading like the whole Hebrew verse, right? But they were doing like they use like charms, they use like things. They were doing basically like a magic trick, right? Whereas by Aaron, what did he do? He literally just held his staff over the Nile, and it turned into blood. Like there was nothing else, none of these other things that were going on. So it's very clear that they're not, they're not doing it because they actually have power from Hashem. They're doing some kind of like magic trick, right? And and so Moshe goes to Pharaoh and says, send your people out, and if you don't, we're gonna bring the frogs. So obviously, Paro doesn't listen, so he brings the frogs, and this is like really crazy. So he does the same thing. This is like where I messed up in the first thing. Does the same exact thing. Aaron puts his hand out over the river, and all the frogs come out of the Nile. Now it's really interesting because in one place it uses the term et chatzfaradim. Et chatzfaradim. I'm trying not to say Sephard. It's not Sephardim, like Sephardic Jew. It sounds like the same, whatever. But then later on it says the frog. Yeah, it says the frog Hatzfardea. So there's double language here. In one hand, it's like raise up the frogs over the land of Egypt, and then it says Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frog ascended. Right. So Rashi says this crazy thing. It was one frog that initially arose from the river. They hit it, right, and it streamed forth swarms and swarms of frogs. This is a midrashic interpretation, so it's like not necessarily to be taken literally, but you should believe it. It's like a midrash. But the simple interpretation, it was just like a swarm of frogs, right? Same with, yeah, okay. And there's this other crazy thing where when it says in your house, bebetechem, it says only afterwards, this is Rashi, and only afterwards into the house of your servants. Meaning, Paro initiated the plan to enslave the Israelites first, before any of the Egyptians, as it says. And Pharaoh said to his people, and therefore the punishment began from him, meaning the frogs plagued him before they struck his subjects. And there's this really, and it goes on to say, and into you and into your people and all your servants will the frogs ascend. Okay, Amanda. Shkoyach. Like 1 second. I want to read your message. Are you able to? Yeah. Okay. Go on Chabad Academy's YouTube channel. Go on Chabad Academy's YouTube channel. All my recordings are there. You can also hit me up if you are on the group chat, the Chabad Academy group chat. Just click on my name, send me a message. I can answer all the questions you have. And if I can't answer the questions, I know someone who can. So, yeah, have a good one.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Absolutely, Basimcha. Hope to hear from you soon.
Yes, take care.
Yeah,
goodbye.
You too. Where was yeah? Okay. So Rashi says, what does it mean? What does it mean into you and into your people? Rashi says they would enter into the Egyptians' intestines and croak. Like, this is crazy. Like, so what's the var? Like, what is Hashem trying to do here? So first, we're going to, like, kill your gods because they don't mean anything and they're useless. Hence, like, why they're bleeding. And then, if you still don't get the message, we're just going to cause this insane confusion. We're just going to drive you crazy, right? Because I don't know if you've ever lived in a rural area, but the frogs get loud. Like, especially, like, I live in Texas, okay, in the South. They can get pretty loud in rural areas, so loud, such that you might actually, like, start going crazy if you don't, like, leave or you don't, listen to something else. So imagine that, but, like, inside, like, it's coming from inside yourself. So it's like no matter what you do, you can't get away from it, which is, I mean, that's like Hashem. Like, no matter what you do, you can't run away from Hashem. Like, Hashem is inside you, outside you, everywhere. Like, in the bathroom, in the kitchen. Like, there's no place where Hashem's presence doesn't permeate. Now, the fact that we don't always feel that, the fact that we don't always, like, it's not always apparent, is a result of this whole mystical, like, conversation. But basically, like, because Hashem hides himself, so to speak, we don't see that. But the truth is this: the truth is, like, you can't run away. You can run, but you can't hide. That's the message of the frogs. Then Paro is like, please, like, what does he say? This is really interesting because it says, so, yeah, so he says, Parashat says, entreat Hashem that he may remove the frogs for me and my people. And Rashi doesn't bring this, but I learned, I can't believe he doesn't bring this. But I learned that basically the Paro was infested with frogs, like he had frogs inside of him. And so now he's like, okay, Moshe and Aaron, like, you got to daven for me, man. Like, I'm going crazy, so please, daven for me. Whatever you need to do, just make sure, like, you tell your God to get, take this away. And so Moshe says, kind of in a cheeky kind of way, he's like, oh, well, when should I do this? Like, you tell me when you want me to do it, and, I got you. And he's like, all right, for tomorrow. Only in the river shall they remain. He said, as you say, so that you will know that there is none like Hashem, our God. The frogs will depart from you and your houses and from your servants and your people. Only in the river shall they remain. So that in fact does happen. Moshe davens to Hashem, and he brings relief. Hashem stops the frogs, but he still doesn't listen. Classic Pharaoh. Now the lice thing. The lice plague or makkah is really interesting. Not just on its own, but the fact that the magicians can't do this, and this kind of is how the other things that they were able to do were just like magic tricks. Because if you've ever done a magic trick, you've ever seen a magic show, you ever do anything like that, like you learn the secret behind the magic trick, it's like usually some illusion. It's like an optical illusion. It's a sleight of hand thing, but there's always limitations to these illusions, right? And so too was the lice. So the lice were too small for the magicians to manipulate with their tricks, their magic tricks. So they they would try to like do like incantations and like do like mumbo jumbo, and it wouldn't work because you couldn't do that. So for them, it was very, very apparent that, and the way they say it is, the sorcerers said to Pharaoh, it is the finger of God, which is like a whole other thing, and I don't have time to get into that. But like previously, it says like Hashem's gonna put a hand over the nation of Egypt, like a literal hand. I don't know what that means. Right? Because Hashem doesn't have a literal hand. I don't know, but now he's saying it's a finger. It's a finger of God, not like a whole hand. So they're getting it, but they're not getting it. They got like a fifth of it. They got like one finger out of the 5, but they're still getting it, and they're basically
also,
yeah.
And also when it says that Hashem is gonna put his hand, it's like on the tetragrammaton, and then Pharaoh recognizes the Elohim name, like it's by Elohim here.
Yeah.
They have to mix it.
Yeah, no,
it's like the same gematria as Ateva, like nature.
Yes.
But he didn't recognize yet something, even though it was the beginning of his teshuva.
Yeah. No, exactly.
But he didn't recognize the transcendent tetragrammaton.
Yeah, you got it exactly right, and that's actually a really deep topic that again, like totally that's another 3-hour conversation. But it does say when it does say previously when Hashem introduces himself to Moshe in the burning bush in the sneh, that he says, Vayidaber Elokim al Moshe, Ani Hashem, like I am the tetragrammaton, right? But it says Vayidaber Elokim, so like what's the whole idea? The idea is it's the same thing. Like you may think that there's one God that's good and like one God that's bad, but no, that's the whole problem with the Egyptians. They have all this crazy ideas about like all these gods that do different things. Hashem's like, no, like Vaidaber Elokim Ani Hashem, like Elokim is Hashem, it's the same thing. So a whole other thing, but anyway. Yeah, so the magicians can't do it. So Hashem's just saying, first of all, we're going to kill your gods. Second, if you don't get the message, we're just going to drive you crazy. And then we're going to prove, like beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the magicians are just magicians. They're like tricksters. They're illusionists. Like David Blaine or whatever. Like no different. And the way to do that is they actually come out themselves. And they say, like, this is Hashem. Like Hashem's doing this, like telling Pharaoh, like, you gotta just put up the white flag. You gotta give up, man. Like there's nothing to talk about. Of course he doesn't listen, but this just proves like everything about Egyptian culture is like false. This whole facade. And another proof of this is like this whole parsha, this whole like, and next week, never did the Egyptians ever call out for their gods. They never do. Like they have all these gods that are supposed to, and they never do. Why? Why is that? Well, because the very first thing Hashem did was to like prove their gods are false. And you might not think, like, you might just like fly over that, might not think that's too significant, but in Sefer Yonah, right, the book of Jonah, when Yonah goes onto the boat, right, and he's trying to escape from his mission, and there's like this storm, and the boat is about to capsize and everything. So what do the other sailors do? They start praying to their gods, right? So like already in Torah, there's this idea that non-Jews will resort to praying to their gods in times of trouble, but here, like, they don't do that. Why don't they do that? Because they know, like, they're already convinced, like, okay, our gods are false. We can't get away from Hashem. Our magicians aren't going to help us. So, like, they're kind of, they're figuring it out. They're getting the message, but Paro is not. Paro is not. Hashem said to Moses, go back and threaten Paro again with wild beasts. And the vort about this, let me see what Rashi says here. Yeah, so basically all these different like animals came from all around the world. Oh man, Zoom's like, we got 10 minutes. That's not fair. That's not cool. I don't like that at all. Well, all right. Sheesh. It's too, like, I was really tripping, thinking I could do this in 30 minutes. It's insane. Oh, basically, so the beasts, like, they come from all over the world. Basically saying that Hashem not only has power over your gods, not only has power to, you can't escape him, you also, you can't rely on these magicians. But also, Hashem has dominion and power over all the animals too, not just like you, right? So you know how they worship animals in Egypt? They have like the lamb, they have, right? And that's important for Pesach. They have, the cat and the dog, and they worship these things, these lions, right? Hashem's like saying, no. Like those are my creations. Like you don't worship them. So much more to say about that, but I'm moving on just to cover ground here. Then here's crazy. This is the craziest one for me. The one where all the animals just die. Not the not the wild beast that he sent. No, the very next plague is all the livestock, all the domesticated animals will just die. Now, initially, upon reading this, a surface reading of this, you might think that there was a plague, like an actual plague, like a sickness upon the animals, but that's not the case. They literally just like keeled over and died. And what does it say? So basically, they didn't die by a plague. So Hashem is trying to tell you, like, I, recreate the world every second, every moment, and I don't actually have to send you a plague to kill you. I could just decide to not allow you to live. Like that, like my essence, the essence of Hashem is his chayut, right, and like his life force is the life force of all creation. So like in a snap of a finger, metaphorically, he could just decide like, oh, right, you're not gonna live, you're not gonna wake up in the morning, right? And this is something that they could not accept. This is also part of their avodah zarah, that even if they believed in Hashem, like obviously they had an idea of the Creator, because even the magicians were like, oh, okay, this is Hashem. Like it took a while, but they got it. So they have an idea, but they think like, okay, well maybe Hashem created the world, fine, but he's not like intimately involved in my life. Like he's like over there in heaven or whatever. Like, and we can't really like talk to him and reach him, or he doesn't care about what I'm doing or whatever. And you kind of take for granted that the world just already exists and you're just kind of living in it. And the Torah is coming to tell you no. Like Hashem creates the world every day, and Roberto, you would know this. You would know this. It says like in the bracha before, for the Shema, right? It says Mechadesh betuvo bechol yom tamid maseh bereshit, right? So like that's what that means. Like Hashem renews. The English translation is terrible. Like it just says like, oh, like Hashem renews the day every day, and I'm like, okay, fine. It means like, okay, it's a new day or whatever. It's like kind of a cute thing, but no, it's like, no, Hashem literally every single moment is like Maseh Bereshit all over again. It's the literal creation of the world all over again, every second, every moment. And then the last thing is he attacks. What is the last plague here? So the second to last plague is the boils. And so he attacked their religion, attacked their religion. He attacked their sanity, their minds. He attacked. He proved that he could manage like very small things, and he attacked their parnasa, or rather their land, and he was proving that he had dominion over all the animals. And then he attacked their parnasa, like their livestock, because in an agricultural society, your livestock is how you make your money. Like whether you're selling the meat or you're selling the animal itself. Like think about this: like each cow is like several thousands of dollars, right? So like imagine that like now your cow's just like dead. So yeah, there you go. And then if he still didn't get that, if they still didn't get that, he's gonna attack the body. So he's attacking like their health, and that's why they get like all these boils, these sores all over themselves. And then the very last, I got like 4.5 more minutes here, so I'm just gonna finish off with the last makkah, which was hail. Now this is crazy. I wanted to spend some time on this one because this is insane. So 24. It says literally, the Torah, this is not even the Rashi, the Torah says there was hail and fire blazing inside the hail, was very heavy, such as had never been in the entire land of Egypt from the time it became a nation. The hail struck the entire land of Egypt, everything that was in the field, from man to beast, all the herbs of the field, and the hail struck, and every tree of the field it smashed. Only in the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel were, there was no hail. So, again, like the Israelites, the Jews are just seeing all this happen to other people. And, again, like the message is for them too, but it's also for the Egyptians. And Rashi says this was a miracle within a miracle. The fire and the hail were intermingled. And although the hail is made of water, and fire and water by nature do not coexist, yet to perform the will of their Creator, they made peace between themselves. Crazy. Like that, that's a mashal for us. Like we should make peace between ourselves, Ahavas Yisrael and all this stuff, Sinas Chinam, all this stuff. But from the Egyptian perspective, this is very clear. Like Hashem not only controls your gods and your animals and your health, and you can't escape him, and he controls everything, he also literally controls the laws of physics, by the way. So just write that down while you're at it, just in case you didn't get that. So, and just to show that, you see like these huge, like grapefruit sized, or big, I'm assuming they're like huge, right? It says like so heavy, it's never been in the entire land of Egypt since the time it became a nation, right? Like it doesn't even rain there, much less hail, right? So he just like proves like he's the creator of everything. And there's still like 4 more makot that happen next week. So yeah, this all can be a lesson to Jews and Noachites alike. And yeah, that's all I have today. But Roberto, if you have any questions or like want to say anything, you got 2 minutes. Okay. Well, that is pretty much it. If you have any, like I want to say, if you have any recommendations, requests, special requests, if you want me to talk about anything in particular, just let me know. You guys on YouTube, leave me a comment. It's all good. I see them too. But yeah, nothing else. I'll see y'all next week. B'ezrat Hashem.